Hey everyone, my name is Shawn Cotter. I am the executive director for Wicked Queer, Boston's LGBTQ plus film festival, and I'm here with Nicole Costa and Gregory Costa from the Journey of Monalisa. Welcome. Um, it's super nice to have you. I love your film so much. It's what a wonderful sort of portrait of Ivan slash Mona Lisa as an artist. And sort of living in this sort of occupying space in our world as both sort of a immigrant and sex worker and sort of also a living artist, which is kind of an amazing feat to sort of celebrate. So Nicole, tell me a little bit about sort of the backstory of about the documentary and why you made it, your relationship to Mona Lisa, and um, yeah, let's go from there.
Yeah, well, thank you for having us. It's a pleasure for us. The genesis of this film starts in Chile when I was studying. I was 17 years old, and I entered to study acting in the university. And I met Ivan. At that time, he was Ivan because he identifies himself as a homosexual person. He was a great artist. I was so impacted by him because he was natural. He was very extraordinary, artist, and I could see that he was a free spirit overall, and that really impressed me. At that time, we were going out from a dictatorship, so we were in a transition, but the transition was very slow. So people in general don't talk so much about their sexualities. It was very like a lot of censorship, so at that time, someone as Ivan, really impressed me. But the thing is that he was living at that time in a very small town in the south of Chile. So when we finished the scholar year, he went back to his city, and he never come back because he finished. I was just starting the career, so I totally lost his track. And at that time, we had not the social network. You can track people, not by then. So I didn't know where he was. And I when I finished the university, I went to live in Spain for 15 years. Then I decided to start to study audiovisuals. And I learned a lot. I met a lot of people, but I was always, remembering, my first friend that kind of introduced me to the world, an artistic and also as homosexual, all the, kind of different identity from what we were, used to it, So 17 years later, I came to live in New York, and I heard that he was living here. So I was like, oh my God, maybe he's really here. And I talked to Gregory about it, and he told me, but Nicole, but you have all the tools now, so you can definitely track him. And I started, to call by telephone, email people, and I got a telephone number, and I called, and it was Ivan, my friend. So he told me that he was working in a place, in a club in Chelsea. So I was so excited. So I get there at night, and I found a Mona Lisa, as Mona Lisa. So
Mm,
it was like a kind of shock at the beginning, but not because of was, like a female impersonators. It
mm,
was more because I didn't know that he was working in the sexual work.
mhm,
I thought for a moment that he was put away, the artistic activity, and that was kind of shocking for me because for me he was a really natural artist. But then after that, after our reencounter, we started, to film our reencounter. It was very natural, the way that we start to practice again our artistic practicals. So then I realized that he never really put away anything about art. The thing is, he actually put focus in his identity, and that was his way, to create himself or herself as Mona Lisa. And that was so much important that any, production, theatrical production.
Yeah, I mean, the journey. I mean, you take us on a journey with this documentary. I mean, it's aptly titled, because it is sort of a journey, sort of beginning to end. Can you maybe one of the things that sort of like stuck out for me, with it, that not only is Mona Lisa's performances. I mean, I love the sort of the street performance with the braid, sort of walking through the street, because I just think that that's so audacious as a sort of an art. And I love performance art. Like I come from a performance art background myself,
Oh,
and I sort of love that sort of like, that energy of sort of like just being kind of, it's almost confrontational, but it's not meant to sort of be like aggressive, but it is sort of like provocative. And maybe kind of talk a little bit about sort of like your sort of insight to sort of Mona Lisa's, sort of, um, predilection for sort of to be a provocateur, because I find that she really is a provocateur. Like we see it more and more as we get exposed to Mona Lisa, how provocative she is.
yeah. We wanted all the time, to really create a loyal, like a profile, a portrait, a real portrait of the character, because it's all about the identity, I guess. I mean, it's not just the process, being or defining himself or herself as a two-spirit transgender person.
Mhm.
Is also about the artistic identity. And obviously, in this journey, I think Ivan Mona Lisa could, realize or reaffirm herself as a writer also. And that was very important for me. And also, I think all the performative, way to create or to find, it was important because it's a lot of metaphor. The performance that you say that with the braid, it was for me very important because that was a performance that he made in Chile. He performed in Chile the first time when he decided, to go out of the closet. In Chile, we said, ¿cómo se dice? ¿Cómo se diría en Chile? Let the braid out. Oh.
Well, I guess it's kind of like let the braid down. It's kind of sounds like the English let your hair out, but it's not the same. I don't
Yeah,
know.
let your hair down. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's like, to free yourself, something like that.
Yeah,
That's it. That's the spirit. And that was in Chile, in the 90s when he decided to walk around in Santiago de Chile in the 90s with that braid. And it was very, like a ritualistic thing for him,
Mm.
And I thought that was very powerful, and also for as an image, it was beautiful. So I decided I would definitely have to, recreate that performance and also cross the film with that, like a union, like a connecting, like a link of all the episodes in the film.
The braid that ties it all together.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think I think you captured the sort of that sort of power of that performance, because it really, I mean, it does link, throughout the film, but the first time that you actually see it, it kind of takes you aback a little bit, because you're like, what is actually going on? But then as it sort of like progresses, you kind of like really understand. And what I really kind of loved about it is like you felt the weight of it. You also felt the sort of like what it was to actually behold it, I guess would be the right word, or to sort of like witness it, which I also found was very, very powerful, because it is this sort of image and imagery that it is provocative, but it's also, it seems very spiritual in a way, like kind of like grounded in sort of a spirituality, which I found was really kind of amazing. And I kind of want to maybe talk a little bit about too the sort of the, um, of Mona Lisa finding themselves as a sort of two-spirit person as well, because I find that really kind of fascinating, because a lot of times, especially in American, transgender narratives, it's like the binary still sort of exists. And I find that myself, who I'm cisgender, but I feel like I occupy a gray area in the sort of spectrum sometimes, even though I'm very male presenting, I often feel very akin to very female and very feminine sort of like things often. So I really like the sort of the exploration of that sort of like the area in between the two binary poles. If you maybe want to talk a little bit about that and your sort of experience with Mona Lisa's journey.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very interesting the way that Ivan Mona Lisa is inspired in the native culture, you know, to define himself as a two-spirit transgender, because I think it's a way also to separate ourselves from our culture, which is very, very binary, you know, and at this point, we realize with you know, with all the feminism also, you know, I think we are in a new era where we are questioning all of this, and obviously we are looking more into the spectrum, you know. There's a lot of nuances there, very interesting, very rich. And I think Ivan Mona Lisa is a very, you know, he was always very sensitive person, you know. Even in the university, you can see, you know, how he was, you know, making plays talking about that ambiguity. You can say ambiguity,
Ambiguity.
ambiguity,
Ambiguity.
ambiguity. Well, that, you know, and I think at this point, he could, you know, also define, find a better, you know, definition of herself or himself. And obviously it's about freedom also, because it's not like, you know. And also it's interesting because I don't think Ivan Mona Lisa is like saying this is what I am. It's like, this is what I am now.
Right.
You know, because even tomorrow I can change. Why not? I mean, we are always changing, we are always learning, we are always evolving. So this is very fantastic if you really believe that this is our nature. The nature is like that, it's white, no? So it's a great, I think it's a great point of view. What do you think, Gregory?
Well, I think you know, what's interesting to me from the standpoint of, you know, spectator, because the background here is, you know, you have to remember, if for people who haven't seen the film, that these are all people from Chile and living here in the United States as immigrants, and Ivan Mona Lisa has a lot of interaction with other trans immigrants. And you see there's one scene, I think maybe from 10-15 years ago, where some of them, they're all sex workers and they're having a conversation, and they're having a conversation about how they you know, what they think about themselves and their sexuality, and they all have different definitions, and they all perceive themselves in different ways, and they're still kind of trying to find where they are, you know, what it is that what they feel about themselves, how they see the world, and how they can define it in words. And I think that's why it's interesting for Ivan. This whole process is also an artistic process in the performance and in the writing, to kind of express this idea, to kind of being able to express her identity, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was such a point that I feel like is sometimes not really talked about, is that sort of again, sort of existing in the moment, and sort of really kind of like speaking to the moment that you're in right now, and knowing that it could change. It could evolve, it could grow. We're always works in progress, and I think as artists, to recognize work in progress is always a really kind of good thing. And you know, is the art ever done? Is always one thing. So so tell me a little bit about sort of what inspired the look of your documentary, because again, your documentary doesn't really look it's so spectacular, because it's like something that I've never seen, and often documentaries, especially portraits, are sometimes really dry. And yours is definitely not. Like I was sort of like excited, because there's a sort of like electricness to sort of like the editing and the pacing and sort of your transitions and stuff. So what really inspired the sort of the look of your documentary?
Well, you know, this is my first work as a documentary. So I obviously, my references were, you know, documentaries with a lot of interviews, you know, people talking, and, you know, and showing the images and completing, and maybe off, ¿cómo se dice? Voz en off?
Voiceover.
A voiceover, you know. But when I start to work with the editor, Melissa Miranda, is a Chilean woman, very smart and very sensitive. And she told me that we start to explore, a different way to show this story. First of all, she decided, because I didn't want, but she decided, not decided, but she just suggested me that I have to participate. I had to be a figure, a character also in the film.
Mm.
I didn't want it because I always were, behind the camera. For me, Mona Lisa was important, but not me. But the thing is that this is a friendship story, so we couldn't avoid me in some way, even
Right.
if I'm not, showing my face all the time. But Mona Lisa is all the time talking to me. It's Nicole, and she trusts me, and that's the beautiful thing. That's why I could get that access also. So we decided, for example, it starts with the, introducing me, in the film, in the story, and our conversations, our, connection, it was important. So obviously living in New York, Mona Lisa is living in Uptown Manhattan, and I was living in Soho at the time, and then in Brooklyn. I mean, totally so far. So we were communicating all the time by telephone. So I had, these recordings, and we start to build, the narrative with those telephone calls, and it was very interesting because it was totally possible to make it, and we didn't need, the voiceover. So that was a very, challenging way to construct, to build the story, and also, using this the literature also of Ivan Mona Lisa, putting them like a chapters, like, because we wanted, to make the feeling of we were reading a book in some way, with a lot of chapters, and to get the complexity that Mona Lisa has, because it's just like reading a book. There's a lot of, fields or pages, you can find. So yeah, I think that was the most, I don't know if you want to add something, Gregory.
Well, I actually am interesting because I haven't, I don't think we've ever heard this feedback from anybody, Shawn. You're the first person who's ever made that comment. So I'm curious of what stood out to you, visually that you felt was,
Well, I for me, I like you sort of got the sort of personalness of it, which I feel like a lot of documentaries and a lot of portraits, the obvious, sometimes it's majority of the time the directors don't have a personal relationship with the subjects. And I felt like what was really interesting and what I found was really unique about your documentary and this portrait of Mona Lisa is that you did have this sort of relationship, and it was sort of this creative, and I felt like you were both collaborators in it. And so I was really kind of interested to see if how much Mona Lisa kind of collaborated with the sort of final look as well.
No. Oh yeah, she was a great collaborator. I mean, she was always suggesting, things. She was, I think at the beginning we didn't know that we were doing a film, actually. It was more very like intuition. But she started to feel like this was a kind of therapy or something, because she really wanted to talk more about herself. He needed, to articulate her own process, and that was amazing. She was all the time like, Nicole, I mean, I feel like I want to talk about drugs. This is something that I really need to talk. I mean, I think she was trying to build herself and be very front, up, like. Really honest, that
Mhm.
was like a kind of a gift for me, she was very generous, with this exposure, actually.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree because it was like, again, it was a candid portrait that like you don't necessarily see that often in documentaries, because again, I feel like the personal relationship that you both had sort of like allowed that sort of candidness, because I like the definitely the drug use, sort of like kind of like the conversations around drugs is one of the things that sort of really kind of stood out. Also the scene with the John and and the sex work as well also kind of stood out as well. And I was just like, wow, this is so like candid and fly on the wall that I'm like, it kind of blew my mind because I was just like, wow, wow, like documentary gold, I guess. But I mean, at the same time, like the obviously Mona Lisa felt so comfortable with you and was a willing collaborator in this sort of whole process, to sort of that you could actually get that sort of that footage.
Oh yeah, no, I have to say that it was wonderful that her generosity and her trust on me, because she never watched the film until the premiere.
Oh,
And I was like, ooh, I don't know, and she was like freezing, like watching the film, but she needed, like a couple of days, to realize what I think she needed some digestion after the film. But obviously, it's hard, to see a portrait of you, also the view of someone else, about you, and a lot of people watching very intimate things of you, yeah, but I think she was very happy at the end, and I'm so happy because for me that was very important, that she felt comfortable and she felt that it was a good portrait of her.
good. That was sort of my next question too. So you kind of sort of answered my next question of the sort of reaction of Mona Lisa with that too. And what is she up to now?
Where is Mona Lisa?
Yeah.
Oh, Mona Lisa. Mona Lisa is writing her second book. It happened something very magical, actually, Shawn. I have to tell you. This is the gossip.
Yay.
No, when we were in the pandemic, the pandemic crashed in Europe. We were in the lockdown in Spain. They were in a lockdown, and the second book of Mona Lisa were launched in America and also in Spain. In Hispanic countries.
Mhm.
So in Spain, by Alfaguara, everybody were in the lockdown, and Pedro Almodovar, got the book of Mona Lisa.
Oh wow.
So he read the book and he was amazed. And he wrote something, in the El Diario, which is a newspaper, digital newspaper, very, very famous in Spain.
Mhm.
Writing like these days have been very boring, and I'm having difficulties to write and to be inspired, but I got this book and it's amazing. If I'm Mona Lisa, transport me, blah, blah, blah. Well, that was wonderful. After that, a very great, publisher and publishing house called the editorial in Chile, and they decided, to launch the book in English.
Oh wow.
So now it's going to be, Mona Lisa is going to launch her book in English in June, and it's going to be like a huge event with a prologue from by Pedro Almodovar also.
That's amazing.
It is, right?
Here's the hot tea, fans. So if you're watching, audience, as you're watching, look out for that book in June. Wow, that's amazing. So kind of like bringing sort of the pandemic, I guess my sort of like my last question for you is like, obviously the pandemic has been really hard for everyone. How are you doing? And two, if you've been working, what are you working on, and what's sort of next for you? And what's next for the film as well?
Well, do you want to reply about the pandemic?
Yeah, we're fine. It's like one thing is that everybody's going through the same thing, right? So we're fine. We never got sick, so we just managed. But Mauricio.
Yeah. So the thing is, when I was lockdown, also at home, I started, to check the archives that I had of Mauricio, which is a character in the film. Also, is the Argentinian friend.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember her?
Yep.
Or Maxima. So Mauricio has a lot of footage from Argentina, and wow, is another treasure. And I decided that I had to really do something with it. And he's very talented, with a camera. He's a very sensitive eye also, and that for me is very interesting, because one of the things that I'm very interested in is like to democratize, the art also. I think the art is everywhere, and you can find artists like that, they are not coming from the academy,
Right.
like the not formal, from not formal education, as Mauricio, for example, Maxima, and he's great. And I decided, to give him another camera in the pandemic. So he has been, recording, the sex work in pandemia, which is really interesting.
Wow.
I think it's a great subject, and I think I really want to got into that, because it's a very vulnerable, population. The
Mhm.
group, the community, the transgender community, Latinx in New York, for example, and with the pandemic, they didn't receive any help, and nothing, because they are undocumented people. So it's very hard, and I think it's a very good way. It's a very good start to talk about, the vulnerability and the precarity, of these groups. So yeah, this is what I'm working on it now.
Well, that bravo for that, because I couldn't agree with you more. That the more sort of like outreach and sort of highlighting that we can get on sort of undocumented populations and also sex workers, because often it's like swept under the rug. Everyone. It's like the sort of the joke is, it's not actually really a joke, but it's like the so many people go that are in higher offices go and use sex workers, but they're always the last to sort of receive any kind of like help or benefits and stuff like that in times of crisis. And I feel like, we have to give everyone some dignity and also some also a platform to sort of raise their voices as well. So I commend you for sort of kind of taking on that project. What about you, Gregory? Get anything on the stove cooking up?
It's got a few pots on the stove, television projects. We got stuff, it's been an interesting time. There's a lot going on, but it's everything's different. We've never been in this situation where we're having all these festivals virtually, right? This is a new one.
Yeah, I mean, this is our second sort of virtual festival. So, and no one gave us any rules, which is kind of nice. It's kind of freeing at the same time. But at the one, it's weird because like I feel like it's in a vacuum a lot. But the upside of it is that it's great because I have to say that filmmakers have been really kind of generous with their time and sort of spending time with us. So that is always appreciative, because that's one of the things that really kind of makes the festival a special thing, is to kind of spend some time with filmmakers. So I appreciate your time.
Appreciate your time.
No, and for us too, because I really miss, the connection, to can, talk about it, and it's so at least, we can have this kind of events, yeah.
and
Oh.
cat bomb.
Oh.
That's Jacques. He's the cat bomb. So again, so audience, if you've not seen The Journey of Monalisa, what are you waiting for? It is playing until April 18th on our Zerb network. For tickets and full festival information, go to www.wickedqueer.org. Gregory and Nicole, thank you so much again. Any final words for our audience?
Any what?
Any final words?
Oh, well, no, yes, the invitation, you said so. So yeah, please go ahead and watch the film and get inspired by Mona Lisa.
Exactly. Make some art, folks.
Yeah.
And
Thank you
thank
so
you
much.
again. Yeah, thank you again.